All right, everybody. So I'm just going to get moving. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. And if you can't, you should check your sound options on your machine because I believe we've tested this out and we're hearing each other loud and clear over here at Microdesk. Okay, so this is a follow-up webinar to the Revit Template Creation Part 1. I'd just like to add a couple of things for those of you that are just jumping on. If you want to follow along, please launch Revit. Any version works. And also, I wanted to add, because last class we had a couple of questions about sharing the template. And I just want to say that this template that I'm currently using is actually proprietary to a client of ours that I've just manipulated a little bit so that I can show you guys all the cool things that we're able to create. If you'd like to get a hold on it, I might be able to get you a distilled sort of boilerplate cleaned up version of it. Also, alternatively, let's save all our questions for the end of the webinar. Like I said, I'm going to leave about 5 to 10 minutes. And I also wanted to add, because I got a couple of questions last time that, the webinar was a little bit too fast-paced. And to that, I just want to say that we are going to be sharing this video recording. We usually have it up in about 24 hours. So, hang tight and we'll get that to you if you missed anything. So just to get started, this is definitely going to be accelerated. It'll be template creation part 2. And I start to get into the sort of more high-performance automation of how Revit template can help us. But before we start, for those new viewers, I just want to talk a little bit about Microdesk. And so we are an AECO consulting firm. We were established in 1994, and we're growing vastly these days. We have about 13 locations in the United States and United Kingdom. We work from east to west coast. We're basically almost a 24-hour operating company on this end of the world. There's about 170 AECO consulting specialists and software developers on our team. There's lots of PhDs in there, lots of architecture licenses, and we are an Autodesk Platinum partner and IBM business partner. So what we do offer building information modeling services. We also offer enterprise strategy and workflow assessments, technology and management, which is what we're doing today, sort of mentoring or webinars, and then application development. If you would like to have a custom plugin made or a custom template created like this one, you can definitely shoot us a call. And we will help you out with that. As for the BIM part, we can do production. We can also do strategy development. So we're a full-ranged company. Just a little bit about myself. For those of you that have seen this, I will try to go a lot faster this time, just so that we can get to the beef of the presentation. So my name is Jirji Shkurti. You guys can call me GJ if you want. I am very involved in emerging technologies. I have been using BIM processes for the last 7 years. These days I do a lot of business intelligence and analytics, create standards, content creation, and templates for a lot of offices, and I've been working in the AECO for about 10 years. That last one is I am software agnostic, and I do believe that it's not the software that's going to do it for you. It's the thinking behind what softwares you choose to use in terms of completing your desired result. So for today, the Revit template, right? Last week we talked a lot about browser organization, how you can use view templates to place views, and I showed a little bit about how filters kind of work. Today we're gonna jump right into we're going to talk about talks, object styles, and how line weights help us get a graphic sensibility, view templates, filters, schedules, and if we don't finish any of these topics, there will definitely be a Revit template part 3, which is going to be an even more sort of condensed recap of everything I've covered and things I might have missed. So why? Well, first off, you definitely want to customize your office production workflows. What this means is that, if you set up your template a certain way, then you can get your office to cut down on prep time by weeks. You want to introduce a graphic sensibility. This is something that you can definitely do with your view template so that the aesthetics of how you want your drawings to look actually, bump out and look a certain way for your office. This is something that I hear a lot, that Revit drawings look the same, and I think this is something that can definitely be tuned and catered to how you want your drawings to look via view templates. You can definitely set up your title blocks for every project. A lot of time in terms of different title blocks you'd be setting up for anyone that's working CAD. This helps out, and they're all built into the template, so you can mix and match what title blocks you want to drop in and what parameters you want to include in those title blocks. And then finally, we have plug-and-play families. Why do we do this? Well, we don't want to go and search for them. We don't want to create them on a tight project deadline. So if we have some, base but very powerful families, we can, throw them into the project, and then eventually we'll build off of them rather than have to start from scratch when we have a tight deadline. Just a little bit about what's happening next. So I am doing basics of template creation in Revit Part 2 today. We got Revit Tips and Tricks by Alan Alexander, and then we will definitely have BIM 360 Design by Peter Marchese. Like I said about the template creation in Revit Part 3, that will be happening in January, the first quarter. And then you can see some of the other things that we're offering in the fourth quarter over here on the right-hand side. Like I said, questions, please and I do appreciate the questions you guys posed last class. Please leave them for the end, and I will try to get through as many as I can. And so now let's get started. So I'm going to move into my Revit 2017. And for those of you that are new to this, this is where I started last time. Except today, I'm going to cover some new things. And one of the first things I want to start with is just the basic legends, right? And so I mentioned this last time, but something that I try to follow through on my template is I start with these lowercase named legends, which I just use to name and help my users orient themselves when they get dropped on a project. Normally, templates don't have this, and I find it very useful that if I'm just a new hire or someone who's just brand new on the project, I can quickly go into my legends and say, hey, for example, what do I do with my view and sheet naming convention? And so here I've got just a very simple template built off of text and some leaders, where I try to explain how to name the views and why they're named this way and how they work. And so for those of you that were in my previous webinar, those views then can be named appropriately inside of the browser group. Something else that a legend can help me with is, let's say I wanted to see what my line weights were doing, just if I've got them set up, but I needed somewhere to visualize them, right? And everyone knows about the TL or the thin lines option, so you have to have TL turned off, and you'll see how your line weights are set up. In this case, I've set up my line weights to include my line styles, and these we'll talk about a little later, but essentially they're based off of micron pens, and I've simplified them to 10 line weights for my line styles. So this is anything that's a 2D line that I sort of draw that is not modeled, and then these are my line patterns. Alternatively, over here, you'll see that I just put these Revit out-of-the-box line styles. So something everyone should note is that when we start working in Revit, unfortunately, these line styles can never be deleted. So if you wanted to customize your template to such a degree where you wanted them to be removed, you cannot, so you kind of have to deal with them. And what I do is I like to, in a legend, point out what they are and how they work. However, when I actually work inside of a project, I do not ever use these line styles. Alternatively, let's talk a little bit more about legends. So something else I like to do is I'll have like a work set kind of matrix, which is very, very important to like the architecture side. In this case, this was built for an FF&E office, Wimberley. And what I put here is what I think they should name their work sets when they start off. And so obviously these aren't going to be all the work sets you're going to have, but it definitely lays out an organization flow of how to think about it. So everything that's capitalized is obviously a work set in the working model. Anything that's lowercase and that says CAD is obviously a CAD link, and anything that says link and is lowercase is a Revit model. Alternatively, I want everyone to recognize also that workset 1 can never be deleted, and it's also really hard to work with when you rename it. So what I like to do is I like to keep it as workset 1 and use it as a container. Now this could be a real problem for some users who don't know what worksets are, and then unfortunately they leave everything on workset 1, and then you have, a big problem later on when you're transferring models, working with the different trades. So just be careful with that workset 1. I always like to make sure when I do my workset checks that workset 1 is the first thing I look at, just to make sure everyone is inputting every modeled element on workset 1. So as for those of you that are familiar with worksets, this is your top hierarchy of how to organize a project. Once you get worksets going, then you look at filters, which we'll talk about. Something else that I definitely like to do is, like in this case, I built them a little door styles legend. And this legend is very simple. Brought in a couple of doors that they can mix and match as detail legend components. And I built a couple of families in here for them to just quickly type in, and these are based off of instance labels, so they can, if they wanted to, they could still schedule this information. But this kind of, like pre-prep helps a new user kind of get themselves acclimated to what Revit is doing, and then also gives them a sort of general kind of organization structure. So another thing that I did here is I just simply made just very dummy view titles for these. Another thing that I also like to do when I work on a template is I like to organize all of my symbols and tags, which is something I've seen in a lot of templates. And this is going to be my segue to the next topic, which is how you use pre-built-in families in order to create, beautiful schedules already kind of pre-baked. But how I divided it here, I worked on my tags. I'm looking at my material tags. This is something special that I had to create for this office. I call it a tags. And we've got symbols, sheets, and title blocks. So in this case, I kept it very simple. I have a very dumbed down version of a view title, which I could just manually jump in there and type something for a name. And I can also type my scale. Sometimes this comes useful when you don't actually have the view set up, but I kept just one view title. And what I had to do in this case, the ask of the company was that they wanted the underline under the view name to, basically continue with each name. So this is just a simple sort of hack, but this is something that you don't want someone to think about when they're in a project. You just want it pre-built. I'm just going to look at this family very quickly to show you what I did. Essentially, I removed the leader line here, and I made this family underlined. And so because it's underlined, the different length of the name will follow that family. So that was something custom that we built for this this office and their view titles. Another thing I'd like to say is you kind of want to keep it simple in terms of like view titles and things like that, because the more you put in there, it tends to get hierarchical view, so be careful with that. And now I'm going to move into very quickly how to set up pre-baked schedules that work off of existing tags. So I want to just quickly look at, this is something that I had to build for this template, which is, I call it a smart dummy tag. And what this tag is essentially a series of instance parameters built into a tag that you can see here under general, and they include everything that's material based as well as finishes for bath accessories and plumbing. So I can tag pretty much anything with this, and it doesn't necessarily have to be part of an actual tag. This is a generic tag that I can go around placing, and as long as I place it, it will build inside of a note block schedule. But this information here is set up just as a base, and you can go in and change it to, let's say it was WF, you know, 30, and then you can name, and all those things once they tag and just modify it, or I can just go in here and manually, you know, put this in. So if it wasn't WF 30, it could be WF 40. I left the category empty because I don't know if it's going to be a wall, if it's going to be a seat, what have you. So that's something that the user has to fill out. But what's really nice is that if you have this information already pre-baked, if I go into, let's say, and I already have this kind of placed on a view, but let's say I place it on a view like this working floor plan level 2. Now all of these are active inside of my project, and also wanted to add that although they don't have leaders, you can add a leader if you wanted to, just by saying add leader. So that's it's another little option that you can choose to forego or keep. So the point of this, why am I doing this? Well, let's say I wanted to copy this. I could just keep an existing one inside that view, and what's beautiful about it is I can go in here and change it. So let's say maybe it's E2, then that E2 now shows up, and then I would go in and change all the general parameters here, which are instance based. And so if I put these in a view, I just want to quickly show you how I built a schedule off of this. So this is called my master finish schedule, and it's a manual. I put manual in there just to forewarn the people using this that this is something you manually place, you copy and paste, and you manually change. It's not automated in the way that you would perhaps have a material. In this case, I was working with an interiors company, so the architect was owning a lot of the surfaces, and they needed a quick way to kind of avoid having to remodel everything. So let me just go to this finish schedule. And as you can see here, if you get your schedule set up, just by placing all those different tags, I've got a really nice organization structure going here. And I've got it set up to the way this office wanted it, which is, you know, with these dividers. And then the order is set up. And then I've also got plumbing fixtures, you know, special finishes. And then I've got my stone, my wall covering, my wood flooring. So this is really nice, right? So all the user has to do is just plug and play what the description of that tag is. Now, how I did this was, let me sort of reverse engineer the process. I went into, let me close this really quickly. Under view, when we want to create a schedule, we have the option to create a material takeoff, a sheet list, a note block. In this case, I had to do a note block because a note block works off of a family. And so that family that I had built for the schedule is, I believe, TG material manual. So once I do that, then I can bring in all of the parameters of that tag. Now, I'm not going to get into how I did that. I'm just going to show you fields. It's pretty simple. I've got a material mark, I got a material finish type, a GC note, and then my description is, you know, a conglomerate of all those parameters that are instance parameters in that tag, separated by this little slash here. So that's all it is, right? But if someone's there trying to think about this while they're working on a project, it's going to take some time, and they're going to have to organize it the right way. Once it's organized, everyone can use this schedule. So that's why we built it. And then alternatively, you know, I sorted and grouped it by material finish and then by GC note. So those are the two top headers. And then obviously I formatted all the headers to represent what they are and made sure that I'm showing my titles. I do not have filters on this, but if I wanted to, I could potentially just say that, you know, let's say I want to filter by, you know, finish type, and then select the finish type that I wanted. So let's say my finish equals, I don't know, metal. And I hit OK. And I go back to that schedule. Now all I'm going to see is my metal. So use your template to automate, like your tags, for example. I'm going to show you guys another way, which is my room style and room finish schedule. So this is something that for this company, we're obviously working in interiors, and they've got their guest rooms, they've got their public areas, and they've got their suites. Those are the three categories that they needed, and then they have the different sort of types in here. So I've established that this key schedule is set up this way through the different fields that I've added here, and then I've sorted and grouped it a certain way. And really it's the sorting and grouping that makes it look the way it looks. So by area type is what these public areas, suites, guest rooms is what that means. And then following that, I'm also sorting by key name. For those of you that are familiar with schedules, you should know what I'm talking about. For those of you that are not, perhaps you don't need to know what I'm talking about, and you just have the template where you go in and you fill in this information. So the only thing the user has to fill out here is, you know, what the actual number of the material is and where it's placed. And so this gets pretty substantial. However, if you fill it in once and you've got a double bathroom 1,000 times, all you have to do is go and make a room and then apply this key to that room. So we're just going to quickly do that. If I go to my working level 1 and I go to create a room, I'm going to create a room in here, and I'll quickly just select that room. Excuse me. And as you can see here, there's this option inside of my identity data for my room to just change that room to, let's say this is, you know, just a ballroom. Once that's done, it basically, excuse me, fills out all the information that's sort of pre-baked in there. So base finish, ceiling finish, floor finish, area type, base material, all of this gets just from that room key. So if that's all set up, then what you can do is you plug that room key into a room finish schedule, and it just quickly populates for each room that you have in there. Now, so let's look for that ballroom. I forgot what number this room was. Let's take a quick look. It doesn't have a number, number 31, right? So if we go to the room finish schedule, 31's got that information baked into it. So instead of, you know, having someone, you know, rigorously type this out and perhaps make a mistake, instead you can quickly just plug in a room key and have all your rooms set up. Okay, so let's now move on from that. So that was just 2 ways you can just quickly get your schedules up and going. And I've got schedules set up here for decorative lighting fixtures, bathroom accessories, and so on. Sometimes you'll see very, very many schedules just populate inside of that template, and you just quickly have to go in and make sure when you're tagging, if it's an actual 3D thing that you're tagging, that that information exists inside of that schedule. I'm going to move on now to the families. There's a couple of beautiful topics I like to cover with families. For example, first off, I might have covered this in the last class, but I'm going to get into it a little bit more in depth. I like to name my families appropriately, and then this XX here is for the project name. So if it's an annotation, then AN, you know, what have you, your short little 2 letters or 3 letters is how you know where it goes, and then where to look for it. If it's a tag, I put TG, and then I give it the name of that tag. If it's a title block, then it definitely lives as TTBL. This is a very nice way to set up your project so that you know what you want to place inside of your model that is actually built into your office. A lot of times you'll see that this is all sort of disparate, and it's got some sort of pre-baked from another project and some from yours. So this is a nice way to sort of isolate what you're working on and then eventually clean it up by purging out the ones that you're not using. And another sort of note on this is I like to say that you definitely want to keep this as simple as possible, one of each, and try not to get into too many types, because the more types you're in, the harder you're going to have to look for something. So like a good example, as I showed before, was a family that you're going to use many a time was that finish tag family that populated my schedule. But another family that we can get into is, for example, just a basic title block, right? And so I just want everyone to know that when title blocks get created, I'm not going to show you the exact process of how one gets created, but the information that's in there actually comes from your project information, right? So if you fill this stuff out in advance, most of those labels that get placed on that title block will be filled out. And so that's where the information on the title block comes from. Outside of it, there are also parameters and other families that get nested into it. So let's just open up a basic title block. I'm going to open up this A0. As you can see, in this case, I've got this set up so that these lines, I know there's a lot of lines, but they're set up to organize how they want the, I guess, the details to be placed. If I don't want a line to show up, I can set it up so that they're invisible, and they're basically there just to guide me or show me like a stoppage point. So these are 2 things. Most of the times I try to keep this even more simple. I believe this was a very specific kind of title block where they've got these lines actually baked into it so that you drop in your view titles here. So that information, right? Obviously the view name, the view number, and the sheet number goes in here, has a project. If you fill that information out and bring it into the actual project, that information will show up. You'll definitely want to, you know, institute some kind of logo up here. You'll have your clients and consultants, your stamps, usually enough for construction, depending on which side of the industry you're in, and then maybe a key plan. But usually it just looks blank like this, and per project, you'll end up filling it out. What we ended up doing here was we added like a family for a graphic scale and a family for a true north arrow, which if we were to go just take a look at how it's working, it's just very simple. It's a bunch of fills and nested families inside of nested families with visibility graphics. So if I were to look here, I guess this one doesn't have one, but you can turn them on and off, and I'll show you guys how they work on an actual sheet. I'm going to also open one more title block just to show you that the more you have in the project, the easier it is for you to make a decision, and also you know exactly what format you need to submit via client or government regulation or what have you. But this is another example of just a very simple title block where these are invisible lines that are set up as grids or guides, and same general idea. This one I sort of developed a little more. Now let's go see what it looks like when we're actually looking at a sheet. So I'm just going to open up a basic, excuse me, overall plan. As you can see, as that overall plan gets placed, the view name and all of those things start to appear. Obviously, this says insert project number because in my project, my project information, I have not put a project name or a number for it, but all this data can be placed on that title block as a label. So once again, if I go back in and edit these are all labels that you can place on there. Another thing that was set up, for example, is do I want to show these grid lines? I've created a visibility graphic to just turn them off. So if I don't want to see them, I could just turn them off up there by selecting the title block and turning it off. I have logos that I can, turn on and off as well. Another thing is if I don't want to see the key plan label, I can turn that off. So do I want true north? Which direction do I want that family to turn to? That's already been pre-baked, and I can just quickly, like, let's say my true north is, 40 degrees. It's actually going to turn that little guy 40 degrees. And then also, same idea with the graphic scale. It updates to the scale of the drawing. You can also override it if you wanted to down here. So that's just a quick setup of how title blocks work. Like I said, you can put very, very many labels inside of here. It depends on how much information you want. For example, we have visibility set up for 50% SD, 100%, and 100% DD. These basically turn things on and off as we'd want them in the title block. I am going to now continue over back to my families and just talk a little bit about some of the, depending on the kind of office you're in, what kind of things you want to look for in a template. Well, one thing wall families. What I like to do is I like to keep it simple. Start with just a general couple and let the project organize that. But those essential 6 should be developed enough so that they can be tagged, they're ready to be placed on a sheet, on a view, and have the information inside of them. They're not just generic. Another thing that you want to look for is that they have some kind of accepted naming convention. And for example, for this, we kept it pretty simple. The XX is the 2 initials of the project name. And so you know that these were built for this template for that project. And then you've got the out-of-the-box ones that live in there. Same idea for floors. I've got 4 floors just baked in here, and I can quickly pick one of them, duplicate it, and then make changes to it. Now I'm going to move really quickly. I believe I have about 4.5 to 5 minutes to give you guys some time to ask questions. It definitely looks like we're going to be doing Revit Template 3 because I haven't gotten to all the topics like object styles and line weights. But I just want to quickly show you a little bit more of an exercise of view templates, which I'm going to show inside of my presentation. And so I believe when I opened this last time, I talked a little bit about, if I go into my view template, I talked about my overrides and my model setup. So just something quick that you guys might want to do for your offices if you have a presentation subcategory is just set up a a sort of rendered way that you want it to export. In this case, we wanted everything to look gray. Maybe this gray isn't the exact best kind of gray, but we knew that we wanted certain furniture elements to be clear or transparent so that only the actual space bumps out and then the furniture is background. These are things that you definitely don't want someone touching. You kind of set them up and you have that be the base, and then all your drawings or views show up exactly the same, and so you hold a rigorous standard there. Another thing that I'd like to talk about in terms of view templates is if I go down to my my document, I definitely don't want my electrical equipment to show up, and I want my furniture to show up halftone. I can just have that already set up so that I don't have to go in here touching it. I also like to add as a rule, if templates have been set up by a BIM coordinator, you should at least have 2 to 3 years of experience with templates before going in here and tampering with things, because you can definitely globally override a project's graphic sensibility with just one click, and then someone has to go and comb through what you did. Another thing that was really important for these, where are they? My FF&E plans, for example, the template has just something slightly tweaked. But if I go to my models, and I'm just going to strictly stick to my models. In this case, they didn't want their floor patterns to show up in any other view except for this one. So as you can see here, there's no overrides for my FF&E, but if I go to, for example, my overall plans and I check out that template, I should see that my floor patterns are always hidden. So that's just something that you don't want to have to guess and check. You'll always know your floor patterns are going to be hidden for that specific view, and it's going to show up accordingly. Another thing, and I know I kind of got into filters last time, but let's say I'm working in a presentation floor plan, and here we are, right? I purposefully made a filter to show that my elevations show up bright red and they scream at you, so that at a certain point, because usually in presentations you don't show annotation objects, you turn it off. And how you do that is you have global control through your filters, where inside of this presentation elevation view filter, if we go even further in, first off, I've overridden the patterns of it, and second off, I've applied it to multiple views. So what it's doing is it's filtering all families that have the name PR in their elevation. So because my families that set up that elevation view are called PR, it's going to know to turn it red and to highlight it for you. Another thing that you can just quickly set up is like your color schemes, right? In this case, I don't have one set up, but if I wanted for this view to have presentation color fills pre-baked into my view template, and so I don't have to search for it. Anytime I put a legend, a color fill legend into my view, I want to use just via the view template. So those are really useful ideas. Something else that I always like to make sure, so as you can see, now I'm in my my PR floor plans, and so most of these things are checked on, whereas in my working they're all checked off because it's like a manual process. And so 3 things that I always keep checked off, or I sort of talk to the PM of who's working on the project, is the underlay orientation, because you want to make that manual. The view range, because you never know if there's a double height space or if you just want to slightly change that. And then the phase filter, because you don't necessarily want to apply a phase filter unless it's required by the project, and when it is, then you can either check it on or manually do it for that view. So what this means is that if I go over here, I have activated my underlay options here as an analog sort of instance-based kind of way of attacking my view. I've also activated my view range, so I can manually change it here rather than in the view template. And so what this does is it allows me to have some kind of flexibility in that view template. We're getting towards the end, and I think I am going to kind of stop here and see what questions you guys have and how I can better prep for the next webinar, which I believe will be in Q1, so that won't be until January. But the next couple of things that I'm definitely going to touch upon is the object styles, and I want to talk about, you know, how line weights work, because that's also a very interesting philosophy that, you know, there's two different ways of thinking about it. So I'll just open it up to you guys and see, you know, how much we got out of that. All right, so I'm going to start with a cleaned up version of the template works as well, so I'm assuming that someone wants a copy of this. Yeah, I apologize for my Dropbox for some reason. I'm just going to exit out of here. And let's see, can you feed a schedule from, say, an Excel, or import a schedule from a CSV file? Yeah, you can definitely do that. It's not going to be native to the Revit application. You're going to have to use some kind of plugin. So there's multiple plugins available that can do this for you. One example is case apps, which are free. Two other examples are Revit Express tools, which will definitely let you do a spreadsheet link, so you're not, you know, actually you're doing it in Excel and then bringing it in. The other one is ID8, which I believe is the most expensive, but yes, it can be done. So if you have really complicated formulas, you can do it that way. I do have one thing to say about that, which is that if you're putting a CSV into a Revit file, you want to make sure that the elements are not actually being tagged in the actual model, and you are separating the 3D from the actual schedule that you're importing in. So that's just something to think about. There are ways to try and tie them together, but it becomes complicated. If it's too complicated, I totally understand, and it might be faster to just build that schedule in. Once again, yeah, it's the 3D elements and how you're going to tag them if you are going to have the schedule be taken off of elements in the model. Cleaned up version. Do we have any more questions? Okay, someone wants a cleaned up version of the template, for sure. How do you make keyed notes? Revit Express Tools, I believe BIM Express Tools is the company that makes Revit Express Tools. So you can just type in BIM Express Tools and that should be one of the things that they offer. How to make keyed notes? Great question. So I'm just going to quickly go in here. When you make keyed notes, you go to Schedule and Quantities. And let's say I wanted to key, for example, doors. Instead of doing schedule building components, you're going to schedule keys. And then when you hit OK on this, then you have the option of the different parameters that you want to include in those keys, right? And so once you've created the keys for the doors, then you add that parameter as a project parameter to all your doors. And that's basically how you create a key. So I don't know if you guys remember, XX is, so sorry, I'm just jumping around here. XX is actually for the project name. AN stands for annotation, and then the name of it. Usually XX gets filled out with whatever the initials of the project are. Sometimes there's 3 initials. Usually I like to break it down to 2. But for the previous question, let me just close this really quickly. If we look at my schedules here for my room style schedule, there's a field here called room style, right? So the actual name of this schedule is called room style. And so that's what allows you to key it into the room. So I add that parameter name to the actual room. So if I go back to, say, my working floor plan, you can see that room style is that parameter, and that's what allows me to pick from the different types inside of that style. So that's how you would set it up. So you would have to go, if you wanted to add this room style, you have to go to project parameters and then go down and add, I believe I might have named it something else. It might be key schedule. Yeah, I'm going to have to follow up on that question, but you essentially add it to all the rooms in here as a project parameter. Let's see what other questions we got. Awesome. Everyone wants a copy of it. Okay, guys. So for the copy of this template, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just like clean out anything that's proprietary. I'll definitely try and give you guys, you know, how the browser organization is set up. Essentially, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a copy of it open, and I'm going to transfer everything that I think is, you know, should be available to the public and this webinar. Do we have any other questions? All right. Okay then. I guess we will call it, and I'll see you guys next time for Revit template number 3. If you want to get a copy of the template, just send an email to the, I believe there's an email on this webinar, or hold on, you can send an email to team@microdesk.com with the recorded video of this webinar, so you can respond to that email as well. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. I'll leave this open for y'all for a little bit longer, and appreciate your time, and I look forward to the next class.